Hello, and welcome to the Rough Edges podcast with Sarah I. Fox. In this podcast, I will guide you through my faith and mental health journey to dispel the stigma surrounding mental illness and to create an empowering resource for those who wish to discover more about these topics. I pray that this podcast will not only bless you, but that it will bring growth and healing to our communities. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Rough Edges. I am super excited to be returning and officially continuing season 5 after the hiatus that I took in the summer. It was like a semi hiatus because I was still uploading episodes, but when you love to do something like this, it's kind of hard to stay away. But I am officially returning with more solo episodes for season 5. But before I dive into today's topic, I want to go over the highs and lows of the week. I'm going to start with the lows. So, at the time of this recording, this past week was pretty rough. I was feeling very sick. I was having a lot of headaches, stomach issues, and I was also feeling very emotionally drained. Now, for those of you who don't know, I am a case manager for the Brooklyn Justice Initiative Supervised Release Program. And my job is to provide justice involved individuals with supportive services and also making sure that they go to their court appearances. So, being that I have all of these responsibilities and just working with that type of population, it can be emotionally tasking, and there are a lot of moving parts to the job. And so, with me feeling physically sick and compounded with the amount of work that I currently have to do, I was just feeling very low. And I had to take a few days off of work in order to just regroup, take care of myself, and just really assess what it is that's going on with me emotionally, physically, and mentally, and just trying to reset. So, those were the lows. Now I'm going to go into the highs. So even though I was feeling very, lethargic and just struggling to try to see myself as making an impact in my clients' lives, I was able to help one of my clients get public assistance, which is something that he's been wanting to do, but he didn't really have the means to do it given his current situation. And me getting to do that and seeing the relief on his face as, the application went through and he had his interview scheduled, I realized that the work that I'm doing is much bigger than me. And it is something that, although it takes a lot of work and it is stressful at times, it is rewarding work in the grand scheme of things. And so, I'm grateful to have had that moment because it really put things in perspective for me in terms of my purpose at this job and also why this is my passion in the first place. And the second high that I have for the week is me getting to reflect and actually reset. So I was sitting by the water one day and I was just allowing my body to just be calm and to just ease my mind and really just give myself the grace to be able to connect not only with my body and my mind, but also return to the source of my comfort, which is God. And as I was sitting by the water, I was just praying. I was just looking at the waves and really just trying to refocus and take care of myself. And usually when I'm feeling down or I have moments of just overwhelming stress, I sit by the water because it's very calming and it's something that gives my soul complete rest. And I was just so happy to have been able to put my needs first and also take care of myself because I was at the brink of burnout and I didn't really listen to my body until I got sick. And that's something that I'm working on. But it was great to actually take the time out to just sit by the water, be calm, and just get rid of the chaos for that day. So those are the highs and lows for the week. And now I'm going to go into today's episode, which is all about lies that I sometimes believe. Now, I wanted to cover this topic because a lot of the times we have core beliefs or unhelpful thinking patterns that really weigh us down and keep us from being the people that we are meant to be. And it also provides roadblocks in terms of like our healing and the progress that we're making in terms of like being better people. So, I want to discuss 5 lies or unhelpful thinking patterns and core beliefs that I sometimes believe about myself. And I also want to discuss the truth or affirmations that I often speak to myself so that way I could be able to reframe those thinking patterns. And so I want to talk about cognitive reframing. So, cognitive reframing is a process in which unhelpful thinking patterns are challenged and then changed. So, with cognitive reframing, that's where the affirmations come in. And for me, being a Christian woman, I also use biblical truths in order to combat the lies that I sometimes believe. So, here are 5 lies that I sometimes believe. The first one is, I am not good enough. So this one comes from an inherent belief that I'm not intrinsically worthy. And this comes from a lot of like pain from my past, especially concerning my family and also just having bipolar disorder in general. I sometimes believe that I am not good enough to have love or have connections with the people that I have connections with, and just even to have this platform. So I often believe that I'm not good enough. The second lie is I must perform in order to get approval from others. So this one comes from my perfectionistic nature. And so, with that, I often believe that I need to be at the top of my game 24/7. I need to be able to be the best at what I do because if I'm not at the top of my game, then people are not going to notice me. People are not going to think that I'm significant. And people are also going to think that I don't have anything of value to bring to the table. So I do often believe that I need to perform in order to get that approval from others. Number 3, people only like me because of how useful I am to them. So this is an extension of the second lie where I often think that if I don't have anything valuable to give to people, then I'm not valuable myself. And this comes from my need to, again, perform in order to get approval from others or to be seen as significant. Number 4, I am meant to be alone. So, this lie comes from the fact that I view a lot of relationships as a transactional connection, meaning that if I don't do something good for people or make people feel good within themselves, then I can't have relationships or I'm not really meant to be in a relationship with someone. And this also comes from my need to be self sufficient because I often believe that I should be independent and I don't also want to be a burden on people when I'm going through problems. And so all of that feeds into the lie that I'm meant to be alone. And number 5, my voice doesn't matter. So this lie has been in my mind for a while now. And especially with the podcast, this lie has been echoing in my mind a lot. And I often think that, oh, people won't want to hear what I have to say. People won't want to hear my message. They won't want to listen to the podcast anymore. And even with recording this, like, I was very hesitant. I was like, should I extend the hiatus? Are people going to actually listen again? Are people going to even care that I'm returning? So there was just a lot of insecurity surrounding my voice and just the message that I have through the podcast. And I have been believing this for a long time, which is why I was hesitant to start the podcast at first, and why I'm also hesitant about returning. Hello again. Before you dive into the rest of today's episode, I just wanted to say thank you so much for your support and for hitting that play button. If you want to expand on that support, here are 3 ways that you can do so. 1. Leave a review. If anything in today's episode resonated with you, or you want to share how the podcast changed your life, you can do so by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or Podchaser. 2. Check out our shop. The Rough Edges shop is a faith-based, women of color owned online shop where you can get a variety of products from tote bags, journals, t-shirts, crew necks, and more. 20% of the proceeds go to a mental health organization. So check it out at roughedgespodcast.com/shop. 3. Connect on social media. Rough Edges is on a variety of social media platforms, including Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and more. If you want to connect outside of listening to the podcast episodes, you can do so on those platforms. If you have any more questions or want more information on the ways that I've just discussed, you can check out the episode description or stay to the end for more information. Now, enjoy your episode. So now, after I've examined all the lies that I sometimes believe, I want to bring some affirmations or biblical truth to combat those lies. So, given that the first lie was, I'm not good enough, here is the biblical truth to counteract that. The first truth is, I am known and loved by God. And this is something that really brings me hope because it lets me know that I am worthy. I am loved because God first loved me and he had a purpose for my life. So Jeremiah chapter 1 verse 5 says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I sanctified you. I ordained you a prophet to the nations." So this was God speaking to the prophet Jeremiah, but it also applies to the way that I view myself in light of who God is. And just knowing that God knew me before I was even formed in my mother's womb, that gives me the confidence and also the hope to know that regardless of what anyone else thinks, I am good enough because I am known and loved by God. The second lie was, I must perform in order to get approval from others. So here's the truth to combat that. I don't need to earn God's love or the approval of others. So this one comes from Colossians chapter 3 verses 23 to 24, which says, "And whatever you do, do it heartily, as to the Lord and not to men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the reward of the inheritance, for you serve the Lord Christ." So this really comes from the idea or the truth that my worth is not tied to what other people think of me, nor is it tied to other people's approval. Once I know that I have the Lord's approval and I am doing the work that He has called me to do, it doesn't matter who approves of it or not. I know that what I'm doing is according to the purpose that God has planned for me to do, and that in me doing that, I am going to receive a reward from Him. And His reward is greater than any other thing or any other accomplishment or accolade that anybody could give to me. So the third lie was people only like me because of how useful I am to them. And the truth to counteract that is there are people in my life who care about me. And I have several examples of this coming to play in my life, but I just want to bring up a couple of them. So, the first one is when I first came home from the hospital. So, after I got diagnosed with bipolar disorder, I was released from the hospital. And that day is so resonant in my mind because when I came home, my phone was blowing up like crazy. Like people were texting me, some people were calling just to check in and see how everything was going. And they just wanted to hear from me because they haven't heard from me in weeks up until that point. And just the amount of love that was poured out from like my family, my friends, mentors, just like people who have made such a big impact in my life. That moment showed me that even though I think that people only want to be around me because of what I could do for them, people are showing me that even in my lowest point, they are there for me and there to support me. Another event that I think about concerning this topic is a World Bipolar Day event that I attended with the Christian Mental Health Initiative. And I was on a panel sharing about my journey with bipolar disorder. And I advertised this on Instagram. I sent it to people. I didn't think people would come, but my support system, my friends, even people I connected with, like through the podcast, they showed up on that Zoom. And it gave me the confidence to know that I have people in my corner who are willing to support me. And that just made me feel so loved. And it also made me realize that people do want to hear from me and people do care about me outside of the work that I do. And lastly, I want to talk about like when I'm off social media. So if I'm going on hiatus, it is so hilarious to me because people would be messaging me. They're like, when are you coming back? Like, and so that kind of counteracts the whole thing of like, oh, if I'm not doing anything beneficial, people don't really care. It's like, even if I'm gone for a while, people are still inquiring and they're like, hey, when is the podcast coming back? And it just makes me realize that, again, the work that I do or the platform or the ministry that I have is way bigger than me and it can actually help people in the long run. The fourth lie was I'm meant to be alone. And the truth to counteract that is I'm not alone and that God is with me and my community constantly surrounds me. So it's more of an extension of my last point that people do care about me. And when I'm at my lowest moments, my community is there to surround me. And I just want to read Joshua chapter 1, verse 9, which says, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be dismayed, for your God is with you wherever you go. So even in those moments where I feel alone, I know that God is with me, and I know that my community is also surrounding me, especially when I need them the most. And the last lie is that my voice doesn't matter. And the truth to counteract that is I have a podcast where people listen and are empowered by the message of hope, faith, and mental health. And this really comes from just like moments that I've had recently, especially in the moments where I wanted to give up. And I'm just going to read a message that I received when I was really contemplating about just stopping the podcast altogether. And this is from a person who had recently started listening to the podcast, and she took the time to message me and let me know how much of a difference that it was making. So the message says, "Hi, I just wanted to say that I listened to your podcast for the first time last night and I literally wept. I wept because I felt understood. I wept because I felt inspired after hearing your story. I wept because I felt hope that God can use me to help others despite my bipolar diagnosis. I wept because your prayer for your listeners was like it was meant for me. So I want to say thank you. Thank you for following God's leading and doing this podcast. Thank you for putting yourself out there and being vulnerable. Thank you for being brave and having the courage to do this at such a young age. Thank you for caring so much about others and sharing God's love." And after reading that, I cried. And I'm even emotional after reading it right now because that message came at a moment where I thought no one was listening. The numbers weren't where I wanted them to be, and I was just ready to just give up on it. I was ready to just say, "Hey, this was good while it lasted. Let's just, stop doing this." And when that message came in, I realized that if I quit now, I will be turning my back on the purpose that God has prepared and also what he planned to do in terms of using this podcast to not only bring mental health education, but to bring faith and hope to people who are in this world and being overwhelmed, being stressed out, and not really knowing where to turn in terms of mental health management. So I am so grateful for all of you who are listening. I'm grateful for this community, and I'm just grateful to have a type of platform like this where I could be able to share my heart, to be vulnerable, and to also share the same hope that I have with all of you. And so before I go, I just want to offer you a challenge. And this challenge is, just a little something that I want to, you know, encourage you to do. So I want you to write down 5 lies that you sometimes believe and 5 affirmations to reframe those lies. So you could do the same thing that I did throughout this episode and just really think about what are some of the core beliefs that you have about yourself that are not true and that really distract you or impede you from making progress in your life or your healing process, and write down 5 affirmations. I mean, for me it was biblical affirmations because of my faith and my personality, but if you want to just use affirmations, you could just write down 5 of those to really challenge and then reframe those core beliefs that you've had or the unhelpful thinking patterns that you've had. So, I want to thank you so, so much for listening and stay tuned for more empowering episodes on Rough Edges. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Rough Edges podcast with Sarah I. Fox. If you want more updates on the podcast, you can follow on Instagram at rough.edges.podcast, or you can visit the official podcast website at roughedgespodcast.com. Thanks again for listening and have a wonderful day.